Our first presenter, Matt Reisinger, he's going to be speaking in regards to building for wildfire defense. Our second speaker, Ain Garrett Coleman, she's going to be mentioning commercial landscape case study. And lastly, Robert Eby, he's going to be referencing 8 Austin Energy Green Builder wildfire defense rating measures. But first, to start with Matt. Matt is a custom builder and remodeler based in Austin, Texas. Matt graduated from Grove City College in Pennsylvania with a degree in industrial management and began his construction career in Washington, D.C. In 2005, Matt relocated to Austin, where he started his company. And currently, his company does a high custom work and has made a worldwide reputation for excellence because of his popular YouTube channel, The Build Show. His followers watch him weekly as he builds to a higher standard, focusing on durable, efficient, and healthy construction techniques and products. He is the founder of the BuildShowNetwork.com, a contributing editor at the Journal of Light Construction, and he publishes 2 videos a week on YouTube and to his daily Instagram. So if you would please welcome Matt Reisinger.
Thank you. That was awkward to stand up here while that was being said. All right, y'all, we got to get moving because they tell me I got to be off the stage by 6 p.m., so I have a 5-hour presentation. Is that not right? Is it not going to be that long? Let's see if my clicker works here. Down is the clicker. There we go. So my name is Matt Reisinger. I'm a builder here in Austin. I moved here in 2005 and started my custom building company. Tim Hill is my 50-50 partner in the business, so make sure you talk to Tim afterwards. And I think it's important to say I'm used to talking to a room full of mainly builders, and I'm usually pretty confident in my speaking engagements, because when I'm talking about framing or insulation, it's something I've been doing for 30 years. But honestly, in this presentation, I'm more nervous today than I've ever been. This is not my area of expertise, and I just wanted to make it really clear, like, hey, I'm learning along with you. And so I'm really presenting my findings in my learning journey more than these guys who are up here with an Austin Fire Department badge on, who are truly the experts. So thank you for having me today. There's a lot of terms that honestly I'm still, even to this moment, getting my head to wrap around. And I know this slide's probably a little small for y'all in the back, but, combustible, non-combustible, this makes sense to us as builders and architects, right? Wood is combustible, concrete is non-combustible. But then all the other terms that get thrown around as we talk about this hardened home, take a minute to really kind of, now, what does it really mean? What's the difference between fire resistant and ignition resistant? And then we got all these different products on the marketplace for years. Like, I remember when I was a 22-year-old assistant superintendent, we used pink plywood in between the condos we were building. And my project manager that I was working underneath was like, oh, that's the fireproof plywood. Oh, it's fire. Oh, okay, cool. I didn't know that. Great. It's fireproof plywood. So there's a lot of terms that get thrown around. So we need to break those down. And honestly, I had to do a little bit of testing. I'm going to show you later to kind of understand a little bit for myself. But let's set the context a little bit to really why I think I'm here today. So let me show you this.
When the Palisades Fire roared into their neighborhood, nearly every structure here was destroyed or damaged. It burned up to the Evans front door.
Nothing defended this house. There was no water drops. There was nobody with a hose. This house just sat here in the middle of this, surrounded by fire.
But their home was essentially untouched.
There's a few places where the glass is cracked on a couple of windows, but by and large, it held up really, really well.
This time, the Evans home and Jim's art survived, but both their hearts are breaking for so many neighbors who have so much work ahead of them.
I don't know about y'all, but watching those LA fires, watching the 60 Minutes piece, it was really heart-wrenching for me. And honestly, I'm not sure that when those fires happened that I really realized how much wildfire risk we have in Texas, too. I don't know if y'all get this free community impact mailed to you, but this is literally the issue that was mailed to me like 3 weeks ago. Ray's got it right there. There you go, Ray. Hold that up. This is the digital version, but Ray's got the paper copy. I read that and was like, oh my gosh, wow. Like, this is a big deal in Austin. Like, if you look at the map from 2015 and then you look at the 2024 map, there's a lot of our territory where you and I work that this is a big deal. So this is not far off in California, or all those builders and architects in Colorado have to deal with this. This is like in our backyard. On the presentation today, we're gonna talk about a couple different things, but I also want to spend a little bit of time on the technology and innovation front as well. And I brought some show and tell samples with me on that. But like we've heard already, I wanted to show this one clip. I think this is next that y'all probably saw. This is just like a minute and a half, but this really, man, something about this really captured me. Tick, 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 tick.
We found fire crews still working to contain the inferno, and a dazed Calvin family sifting through the ruins of their homes and their lives.
This is unreal. Oh my God. My house is fucking... I literally just built all of this.
Man, that guy, did you see that? How many people saw that interview with that guy? Not many of you. You should go back and watch it. They did an amazing job on 60 Minutes covering it. And that homeowner in particular was just really, something about his emotion with it really caught me. So we learned this already today. There's flame, there's radiant, and there's embers. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around what the radiant portion means for us. But I think most of what we're going to end up talking about today, frankly, is embers. These firebrands, as they called them on the 60 Minutes piece. And I think this is just a short piece from another firefighter talking about that. Let's see here.
Over the last 30 years, my colleagues and I have done research involving laboratory experiments, field experiments, and post-fire disaster assessments to quantify and qualify the relationship between a wildfire and a destroyed home. What we found is that the high-intensity flames, more than 100 feet away from the house, are largely incapable of igniting the house directly. It's the little things that seem to be destroying the houses. The burning embers, we call them firebrands, lofted out of the high-intensity wildfire to land in the community, sometimes directly on houses as well as the surroundings. It's not 100-foot flames. It's a pile of firebrands that would fit in the palm of our hand. So my colleagues and I designed a firebrand, an ember shower demonstration. We have a full-size house. It's got bark mulch and pine needles around the base. It's got pine needles in the rain gutters. It's got pine needles on the roof. We have an ember generator that then casts a brand blizzard at this house. In order for those firebrands to be effective in igniting the house, they either have to ignite the house directly, or they have to ignite something around the house that then can spread to the house.
All right, so what I got from that video is that it's not necessarily the first two, it's those firebrands, which means that we need to think about keeping our houses not as much fire resistant, but frankly, ember resistant. And the other thing that I've really started to figure out is it's not even just the house necessarily, it's anything attached to the house. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But let's first talk about, in all my research, everyone talks about the roof being like the number one thing. And a lot of the California houses, not necessarily from the Palisades Fire, although possibly from that one as well, it was the roofs, you know, especially non-Class A roofs. You know, you think about a wood roof, especially that has any amount of, you know, something landing on that wood roof. And man, the roofs are a major source of burning. And I think the thing that really captures me on this is I'm a big fan of simple roofs. In fact, the very first house I ever built in town was with this handsome gray-haired guy in the front row, Peter Pfeiffer. That's the house that Peter and I designed together. in the top middle section there. And I really like that real simple roof design. And since then, I've built a lot of modern houses too. But if you think about a simple roof, like look at the just the line drawings. I'm not an architect, so that's the best line drawings we could do. Sorry, Peter. I'm sure you could do a better job for me. All those roofs are really basic geometry. But what that gives you is the ability to shed, like an umbrella, the rain, but it also gives you the ability to shed those embers, right? Without having a bunch of places for those embers to land and find something to ignite. And in fact, as I think about it, I probably should have put a circle around a few of those, because look at how many of those roofs have a valley in them, like that butterfly roof in there. Everybody knows what that butterfly roof is, right? That made this list on several different kind of webinars that I was watching. But as I think about that, and I think about Austin that has trees and, potentially other places like they were talking about pine needles, boy, that would be a really hard roof to clean if that was 2 stories up, right? And you would catch a lot of leaves and a butterfly roof. But also just a standard turn gable on the front, like that hip and valley, you got 2 big valleys in there that are probably going to collect things, especially if you have gutters. So we need to think about simple geometry, and then of course a Class A roof. Here's my personal house that I built. Kit Johnson was my architect, who's was in the building earlier. Kit's a great guy. But my roof is a metal roof, and I did not build my house to withstand fire in any way, shape, or form. But the more I thought about it, I thought actually a drone shot of my house would make a lot of sense, because if you look, there's really almost no spot for collecting of anything on this roof because of that really simple geometry. So think about roof design, and then obviously think of material. Yes, we can get a Class A roof that's an asphalt roof, and you need to think about underlayments as well, being a Class A rated underlayment if we're going to put an asphalt shingle on there. But in general, I'm a big fan of going metal, concrete tile, or clay. Those are going to be naturally non-combustible materials. And if you really did make a fire on top of your roof, let's say you had a firebrand that ignited a big pile of leaves or maybe a downed branch on your roof, how long really would it take for that asphalt roof potentially to succumb to those flames? So these roofs in particular here, that's my house on the upper left. The upper right and the top left, that's a house that we just finished construction called the Reisinger build. And then this hip roof, I just grabbed that picture from a soccer game where I was with my kids. That's just a production builder in Cedar Park. But I thought, that hip design does make a lot of sense when it comes to really shedding any embers that would be flying in the air. I made a video shortly after the LA fires. This one did really well. A lot of people were interested. And the video was basically about the 2 big houses that survived, or that were kind of all over the news, were a house that was built to passive house standards, or passive house principles, I should say, with an architect named Greg Chason. And then the other house you might recognize, a famous actor. Let's watch just a 2-minute clip of this video and why these 2 houses in particular survived the Palisades fire. Look at these 2 houses. One of them, crazy enough, was Tom Hanks's personal home. Couple things at Tom's house, though. Look at this. Pool and hardscape around the house, so some defensible space. Looks to be a metal roof here and a flat roof here, possibly with a ballast. It's a little hard to tell from this jicky photo, but you know what a ballast is? It's where you do let's say a TPO or a PVC roof, maybe a Kemper roof. You put some type of rock on top of it, and the rock keeps the UV rays off the roof membrane, makes it last a lot longer. Well, that rock is also non-combustible. And in general, a lot of the flat roofs, let's say a PVC roof, you can get a Class A, no problem, which is the highest fire rating. The other thing that you're going to notice on Tom's house, there's no traditional, attic space. It looks to be a contemporary, relatively flat roof. So my guess is there's no soffit vents around this house. It looks to be hardly any overhangs, and, kind of a green lawn on that downhill side. On the uphill side, it looks like there's a concrete barrier maybe holding back a hillside. Hard to say exactly, but he's got some defensible space. He doesn't appear to have any soffit vents, which would let in some embers. And again, metal and probably other Class A roofs. Here's an even more striking image, though. Brand new house. I think it's actually 6 months old. next to an absolute charred house, and it appears everything around totally gone. There's really a total desert, arid scaping around the whole house. So we've got this full 5-foot clear. The other thing he did that really saved the day, especially from that car burning, this is a concrete wall. That's not just a regular fence. It's not even a metal fence. That's a concrete wall. Now there is some metal fencing, it looks like, at the man gate and the driveway, but everything else is short. It appears to be maybe a 4-foot tall perimeter wall, but that concrete wall saved for sure this part of the house from the heat. And he specifically mentions in one of the stories that the homeowner was smart enough to go, hey, anything that's outside that's near the house that could combust needs to get away. For instance, these trash cans got shoved to the front of the lot. Those could have absolutely ignited, and if they were right next to the house, they could have caught fire. I've seen some speculation on what the siding is. It actually looks and appears to me to be wood siding. I'm not totally sure. Maybe it's a aluminum siding that looks like wood, but honestly, it could have been real wood with this defensible space and not necessarily caught fire. The other thing you're going to notice is look at the Monopoly style framing going on here. There's no soffits, there's no eaves, there's no overhangs, and there's no ventilation here too. This is a fully conditioned attic space, it appears, and Greg actually mentioned that at some point that I saw online. So there's nothing to soak in or bring in embers into an attic and burn. I believe that I saw online that he specifically used tempered glass on the house for fire resistance. There is a benefit to going to tempered. And believe it or not, there is some glass that has some type of fire rating, which is probably a laminated tempered as well. The other thing that we need to think about with windows is, you know, if this house had vinyl windows, the glass might survive, but the vinyl would melt, the window would fall out, and then the house would be gone. Any house in this area that had vinyl windows, they would have melted like that. The glass would have fallen out, and the house is lost. Pretty crazy, huh? Seeing how that house survived. Interesting to think about the exterior. You know, that house that I found out later, that was a fiber cement on the front that looked like wood. It was kind of faux painted to look like wood, but in fact, it was fiber cement. On the sides of the house, it was 3-coat stucco. So when we think about non-combustible exterior walls, there's kind of 3 main categories that I think of: fiber cement siding, metal siding, and 3-coat stucco. Those actually work pretty well architecturally in our climate. I would assume my architect friends in the room would agree with me on that. So those are some good choices for us in a zone that we were talking about earlier, like an A, B, or C zone. Next, let's talk about some wall assemblies. You know, the 1-hour fire rated wall assembly, I gotta say, I don't feel like I'm fully able to tell you all the assemblies that would meet that 1-hour rating. But over the years, before I was given the seminar, if someone said, hey, what's a general 1-hour fire rated wall assembly? I would say, well, it's 5/8 type X on the inside. It's probably some type of wood sheathing for shear on the outside, and then some exterior gyp as well, you know, like a 5/8 type X on top of that, and then your standard sidings or whatever. So that is certainly one way to meet that 1-hour rated assembly, but there's some other interesting products in the marketplace. This happens to be one of them. This is brand new. This just got unveiled in January. It's called FirePoint. It's from a company called Arklin, and it's a 1/2-inch CDX ply that has a intumescent coating on the front. I'll pass this around in case you all want to see this. That's quite thin, and the intumescent coating, when it's exposed to fire, expands. And it's going to be a little hard for y'all in the back to see this, but I'll pass this around as well. We just put a weed torch on it to see what it would do, and it's pretty wild. It gets all fuzzy and furry. Anybody remember that firework that we used as a kid that was the expanding snake? It was like a little pill. That's the same stuff, apparently. The head, like, PhD engineer used that as the example. He's like, well, Matt, do you remember those expanding snakes? That's not the exact thing, but it's kind of that thing. If you could think of a bunch of expanding snakes in the front of this, that's kind of what's happening. And so he said, when that intumescent expands, it'll come off in your hands, but it won't hurt you. Does it say asbestos? Warning, asbestos product. No, I don't think it says that. It says sawing or sanding wood products in the state of California will probably be bad for you. I don't think there's asbestos in this. I could be wrong, sir, but we don't typically use asbestos in construction anymore, to my knowledge. Anybody refute that? I don't know. I could be wrong, but absence, I believe, is that word, or substance, not asbestos. But look it up. Fact check me on that, will you? So anyways, my point is there's other assemblies available out there for 1 hour fire ratings besides 5/8 gyp. Because honestly, in a climate like Austin, Texas, I'm not a fan of exterior gyp. I think it's a bad choice. And one thing that I want to make mention of is fire is certainly a problem for us in Austin, Texas. And it would be a very big deal to have your house on the the Austin Fire Department guys showed we lost so many houses in this fire. But you know what's not shown up here is all the houses that have mold and rot on them around Austin, Texas, because it's not going to make the news. But honestly, water is your number one enemy for houses. So whenever we think about these 1 hour rated wall assemblies, yes, we need to make certain that we meet the code requirements, but we better be darn certain that we don't have water getting into our assemblies. Because in a wood framed house, if water gets in and it's built to code, let alone a much higher code like a passive house, that water is not going to dry. So we need to make sure that we're building really good houses from a water perspective and then an air perspective, and that those assemblies also meet the fire codes. So here's that. I think this is a drawing of straight out of the code. This is table 721.12 from the 2021 IRC. We're switching in July to the 2024, but this half-inch gyp is kind of a problem for me in terms of like, what do I do to make that exterior gyp both waterproof and airtight in the assembly? So yes, we can do it, but there's some troubles. There's hard parts about that to happen. Let's put it that way, because we don't want that gyp to see water. Now, there's alternatives to exterior gyp too. This is one that I just found out about recently. USG makes a structural concrete panel. Apparently, this was developed for the military to build like bases in Iraq or places like that. And this is a true cement-based structural panel. Originally, it was developed for subfloors, but you could use this. Your engineer, probably Olivia from MLA, could do the research for you and show you how this could actually be used for shear value as well. I used it on a house recently for soundproofing purposes, not for shear and not for fire. But so that image on the bottom left is basically a bedroom wall to a hallway that we were soundproofing. But I was impressed. It's much less crumbly than like a Durarock or like a cement backer board. It feels like a cement plywood, if there is such a thing. So my point is there's other options for materials out there. Here's a quick video on that fire point that I'm sending around, just because I like to do backyard tests. So this was one of my backyard tests. This is just a 1 minute clip of us torching it. Little backyard test on Arkland fire point. This is the product right here. It comes in a 4x8 sheet. This is CDX plywood that has this patented intumescent coating on the face that actually resists flames for 90 minutes in a 60-minute rated assembly. So it meets and exceeds, it actually exceeds code by 53%. Can you believe it? This test I've been doing here with my torch, which is apparently 3,600 degrees in propane, it's been going for almost an hour. And you can see it still hasn't gotten flame through the backside. This is a really impressive product. Cody, how was my PPE on that test? Did I do okay? Thank you. I appreciate that. What you can see is there was 2 fire extinguishers and 2 5-gallon buckets of water in the foreground right before the camera. And turns out it's not 3,600 degrees. A propane weed torch is 2,100 degrees. So I was wrong in my numbers there. But what's cool about this test is that I wanted to see how different materials would perform with fire. And so I took a bunch of materials that are used in fire-rated assemblies, and I don't have a photo of this. I should have put it in there. I tested some Type X 5/8 drywall, and I tested some FRT, fire-rated treated plywood, the pink stuff. And go check out that video. I'm not trying to necessarily plug my videos, but of course you can. I would love for you to watch them. But we did a 20-minute video on how those did versus those. And torching them myself, burning them myself, really made me kind of help understand, like, this 1 hour fire rated assembly is not going to save the house if you put a blowtorch on it for an hour. It's going to give you the ability to get out of the house, ultimately. It's not necessarily going to save the house. So when we build with wood framing and we talk about these 1 hour and 2 hour rated assemblies, we're saying, look, we're going to slow down that flame from getting the building caught on fire and killing the occupants. But we're not necessarily saying we're going to actually save the structure. Put a pin in that. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Let's talk for a minute about soffits, ceilings, overhangs, eaves, all this kind of stuff. Look at that top picture right there. That's a Class A metal roof. It appears to be a fiber cement siding with a non-vented soffit area. There's no place for firebrands to get in here. So it's okay to have overhangs. Don't feel like you have to eliminate overhangs to meet these codes. And in fact, I would tell you that overhangs are really, really important for the longevity and durability of the house. I always use the example of the umbrella. If you look at old houses in Austin, they had a giant golf umbrella over the house, right? They have 2, 3, 4 foot overhangs. And any house over the years that Tim and I have remodeled that has a big overhang, we find almost no problems. We'll find maybe a little bit of termite damage, but there's hardly any problems with the house. But the only problem we find is down at the feet, right? If you and I went out in a trench coat like our grandfathers had, and we had a big golf umbrella up, and we're walking in the rain, where would we get wet? Where would the problems be? Our feet might get wet, but for the most part, our body, even with a really bad trench coat, maybe that wasn't super well buttoned, would be okay. You'd be fine. I wore my rip-off shirt today. However, in a modern house, right, if we have a Patagonia jacket on and maybe a little bike, remember those biker's hats we had in the 80s that had like a 1-inch bill? If we have no overhang, like a biker's hat and like a Patagonia jacket with a hood, we better make darn sure that there's no problems in our raincoat, because we don't have that forgiveness. So I don't want you to hear that you need to eliminate overhangs. Yes, you could if that's the design choice you want to make. But when you eliminate that overhang, remember, you've got to really make sure that you've got a bomber assembly when it comes to water and air, because you no longer have that golf umbrella over the house. Venting, we talked about this a bunch already today. I don't want to belabor the point. I did bring some samples, and actually I think these guys are here, right? Is the wildfire defense folks here? Come talk to these guys afterwards. I brought some samples. You can pass these around. They make a bunch of different options. I would consider this a retrofit myself, though, frankly, since this is a room full of Austin builders and architects. Don't vent your attics. Let's get into the 2000s and stop venting our attics. We don't need a vented attic. And the big problems with vented attics in the South is we have all this stupid ductwork up there, right? Ducts are not meant to go outside. If you drove by a house that had ductwork on the roof, you'd be like, I can't believe those idiots put ductwork on the roof. But in reality, ducts in your attic are just as dumb as ducts on your roof. So let's go to unvented attic assemblies. Don't buy the vents from these guys. Sorry, y'all, we don't need them. Buy them for something else, but don't buy them for your new construction house. Don't vent your attics. Go to a non-vented attic assembly. We have the technology. We can build it better. Okay. Something interesting, though, that I did learn from these guys. I think one of the head guys is here, isn't he, from Wildfire Defense? There he is in the back row. Talked to the handsome guy with the glasses in the back. He told me and actually showed me a video of this. This is really interesting. There is a real big difference between 1/8-inch mesh and 16th-inch mesh in terms of what makes it through in the testing. I wish I would have put the video on the screen for you, but 16th-inch mesh with just a 1/16 opening is 98% effective on embers getting through. And the deal is, because the 2% of embers that do make it through are so small that they don't have the energy to actually ignite the attic. And that's why that 1/8 is a really big deal. Now, they do make thicker mesh that will potentially meet your code requirement. They've got an 1/8-inch mesh, but the 1/8-inch mesh is only 75% effective in keeping the embers out of whatever vented cavity you're talking about, which means you've got a lot more material that's on fire making it through that mesh, and you've got a lot better chance of something getting ignited. And by better, I mean worse. That's bad. Better is not good in this case. It's bad. Let's talk about decks for a minute. This is another one that I had to do a little bit of testing myself and figure out. If you look at any of the wildfire research, they tell you that the deck is a big source of igniting the house on fire. So making a deck hardened and and being able to withstand and not spread that fire is a really big deal. And that's what that bottom image is down there. Basically, what you're seeing is some type of hardened deck and possibly a hardened wall assembly that the fire, after a certain amount of time, went out, but the fire on the left is now spread to the structure of the deck and the structure of the house. So decks cause a lot of problems. I wanted to see myself what decking materials would do. And to be honest, as a builder, I hear about these Class A materials, and it doesn't make sense to me. Like going back to the asphalt deal, like how is an asphalt roof Class A rated? Like that doesn't make sense to me. It feels like it would just turn into a puddle of goo in a certain amount of time and would just burn the roof, right? So I haven't tested roofs yet. I'll get to that at some point, hopefully. Stay tuned to my YouTube channel. Please subscribe. But this is actually a video that's coming out tomorrow at 5 o'clock. But I'm gonna preview for you, just for you guys. This is a preview. I took samples from Georgetown Lumber and Decking and said, give me a sample of several of your popular ones. And I wanted to try out Ipe, which I put a lot of Ipe decks on. My carpenters hate it, but architects love it. Pressure treated pine. And then I'd got a bunch of other samples. The only one in this bunch, though, that actually has anything that says that it's, quote, fire resistant of any variety is that Timber Tech by AZEK. I misspelled AZEK on the slide. I apologize, AZEK. Vintage Collection. That is a advanced PVC deck material, which is basically solid PVC. And it does say this is a Class A rated deck. The rest of them were not Class A rated. And honestly, I didn't know what rating they had ahead of time. I didn't look it up because I purposely didn't want to be slanted by knowing what the rating was before I burned it. So each one of these, I took I put them out in my back area. And Cody, this is all concrete, nothing but concrete around here. And I've got a Yeti bucket full of water and a fire extinguisher in this photo to show you, just so you knew. And I lit them on fire, each one of them, with basically like a fire starter pill. Like you guys use these in your backyard fireplace. I forget the name. I buy them at H-E-B. It's like a white cube, and it smells really bad. But when you light the plastic, it lights up and gets your barbecue going, or your charcoal or your fireplace. And I tested one, and it burns for about 14 to 15 minutes each cube. So I thought, all right, I'm going to put one cube on each deck board. I'm going to see how it does. Like, does the cube ignite the deck board? And then underneath each one of these samples, it's a little hard to tell, but you can kind of see it in this bottom photo. It's hard to see with the light, but in the bottom photo, there's one green 2x4 and one white 2x4. That's a pressure-treated board and just a non-pressure-treated board. I was curious, like, would that one pill ignite the board, which would then ignite the structure? And I knew it was going to burn for about, más y menos 15 minutes. So here's what happened to it. This picture is taken at about 15 minutes. And this is the point where I finally looked up, okay, which one of these materials and what's their rating? And this was super fascinating to me. If you look at that Ipe piece on the bottom there, that Class A material, basically the pill just burned itself out. And if you took the pill off afterwards, which I don't have a picture of, you could see basically bare Ipe underneath the pill, and around it was charred and black, but it never caught fire. You could probably go in with like a sander on this Ipe deck and sand that off, and it'd be brand new. I don't know. Can you sand Ipe, Ray? Have you ever sanded Ipe? You may not be able. It's like woodpecker lips is what I always hear. My carpenters hate it though because they're allergic to the dust, so we hate installing it. The Class A on the bottom left, that's Ipe. Ipe is the name of the wood. It's a tropical hardwood from South America. Ipe, I-P-E. Other people pronounce it differently. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It's not made from asbestos, but it probably could be because it's very fire resistant. So then the next one that was interesting, this is actually pressure treated, just 5/4 decking material. So southern yellow pine, and that's technically a Class C fire resistant. And doggone it, it really didn't catch fire. Now, in all fairness, it was a brand new board. It was not out in the sun for 5 or 10 years. You know, it was still fairly heavy because it was moist. So, you know, I kind of figured it did especially well because it was brand new. If that had been out baking in the Texas sun for 10 years, maybe it would light a lot faster. But pressure-treated pine is considered a Class C. The next one was non-rated, and that one caught fire. No surprise there. The one on the bottom right is the only deck material that's like a branded material. That's that AZEK TimberTech vintage collection. Don't forget, you can buy non-rated from these guys, but this one was rated. It was a Class A material, and you know, doggone it, it didn't ignite. It got all charred and nasty looking around it, but no flame spread, didn't go anywhere. It did really, really well. The back row, several Class Cs. The crazy one that's like ridiculously on fire. I hate to disparage the manufacturer, so I won't tell you. Watch my video, you'll see it in the background. But that's a Class C material, and it like was ridiculous. We were all like, what? Can you believe what happened? Here's a zoom in of it. It literally dripped fire to below. Whatever plastic it's made from, that like started melting, and the material of the core is like a, you know, I don't know what, a composite deal. And it would drip fire. You'd be like, it looked like a Star Wars, you know, lightsaber shooting fire below. And I took this picture at probably 5 minutes in. It wasn't even the 15 minutes. So at 15 minutes in, that's what it looked like there in that photo. This is taken about 15 minutes. All the others had gone out at 15 minutes. That one did ridiculously bad. I mean, I wouldn't even want to put my gas grill on this deck, frankly. If a hot dog fell out, I might catch this thing on fire. But it was interesting too to see some of the other Class Cs did better, and the Class Bs, as a general rule, actually no, there's only one of them. Okay, maybe I can't say that. Not all the Class Cs were the same. The Class B did measurably better than the Class Cs, and the Class A was the best. So I learned something. That was the only reason I did it. I hope you can learn something from that as well. That was crazy, though. There are other options for decks, though, besides deck boards, right? There are tile deck options. Here's one that, full disclosure, these guys have paid me to make a video, so I'm disclosing now. They've given me a check before. But Embrico is kind of cool. That's a builder that actually invented this. A guy named Mark, who's a builder in Iowa, who a client asked for a tile deck, and he was like, well, they don't make such a thing on a wood structure. So he invented it. It's a non-porous ceramic that has like a fiberglass backer so it won't crack in the wintertime and it won't break. And he invented an aluminum piece with a reglet and a blah, 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 that you can install this over a standard wood deck. So that's kind of cool. And now you could put your Weber grill on that and not worry about it. No hot dogs lighting that tile on fire. But the other thing, though, is we need to think about structure, right? Because if the fire happens and gets underneath that deck, it's not just the deck boards itself, it's the deck material. And these guys who are here, I think, and some other folks, make it in rolls. Oh, I lost my photo. I didn't put it in here. I thought I had a photo. I don't have a photo of it, but picture an elevated deck. Let's say this is the height of the deck right here. You're 4 feet off the ground. You don't want anything to be stored underneath that deck, right? It'd be really dumb for us to store a bunch of firewood or old 2x4s under that deck, because those firebrands coming in underneath that deck are going to light that, and then it's going to light the deck structure. So one thing you can do is actually take rolls of this mesh, this fire-resistant mesh, and you could basically make an enclosure for the top of, or for the bottom side of any enclosed wood structure, especially in a retrofit type situation. If you're building new, there's also a lot of options out there for metal substructure. I'm sure your MLaw engineers can tell you what to use on that. But there's a lot of options out there for metal deck framing, and there's even an aluminum manufacturer I've seen out there as well. Now let's talk about windows and doors for a minute. I had to do a bunch of research on this, frankly, because I didn't know much about this. I wish I had a melted vinyl photo. There is no, I have no love lost for telling you that vinyl sucks and don't use vinyl anyways. And I'm not getting paid by anybody to say that, but I hate vinyl windows. I think they're the lowest common denominator. We only use them because they're cheap, and they're cheap, so they're cheap. But if you have a fire situation, your vinyl siding, your vinyl windows, they're going to melt. And if that frame melts, the glass is falling out, like you heard me say in that video. And once the glass falls out, it doesn't matter if it's tempered or not, the embers are going to get in your house. So avoid any vinyl, frankly, on the outside of the house. No vinyl gutters, no vinyl windows, no vinyl siding. You really want to think about more durable materials. And in my quick research, I was worried about, like, okay, if we want a 20-minute rated window, can we not use a wood-clad product? Well, that's not true. You actually can use a wood-clad product. A lot of them are 20-minute rated. Do you guys know, are there any places that are going to higher than 20-minute ratings on fire-rated windows? In commercial, I think there are some 90-minute ratings, right? That's what it looked like on the web. I don't build commercials, so I don't know the answer to that, but I think there are some window systems that can be higher rated than 20 minutes. But in general, you can get a 20-minute rated window, which would, in some of those photos we saw earlier, resist the breakage and those fire from getting in the house. It's typically going to be something that's going to be aluminum, metal, some type of more durable exterior, though, that you would think of intuitively as being a non-combustible. The other thing we need to remember, though, that we can't control as builders is maintenance. Here's a house that I built a couple years ago that had a flat deck on the garage. And I remember, I'm taking this photo from like the customer's back bedroom Juliet balcony kind of thing. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, when was the last time they got up there to clean that? And I happened to get the neighbor's roof in there too and thought, oh, look at that. We got like 4 years with the leaves built up on the neighbor's metal roof. So we really need to get our homeowners on some type of a maintenance plan. And if we think about flat roofs, you know, this flat roof, I don't know if that was a PVC roof, but let's say if it's a Class A rated PVC roof, if you got a foot of leaves up there, it's probably not Class A rated anymore, right? They're not testing that with a mulch pile on top of the roof. They're testing it with bare material. And that's something that we need to think about. Like this house with those trees all around it, is a flat roof the best choice if this is in a WUI zone? Now, this is not. This was in central Austin. But we just need to really think about location. The other thing that's really interesting is there are some ratings for garage doors for wind, but I have not seen any ratings for fire and just a quick search. There might be some out there, but in general, we want to make sure that we're as weather stripped as possible when it comes to garage doors. And I would also say that some of the wind ratings would also be, just from a builder architect perspective, would be really smart. I put a wind load rated garage door at my house. I have a 16-foot wide garage door. And if you've ever pushed on one of those metal doors, if it doesn't have the bars in the back, you'd be shocked by how much like give those crappy metal doors have. But by adding a T-bar to the back of the door at each panel, you can actually get a wind rated garage door, and it's not that expensive. I did it at my house for, I don't even know how much it was, $250 or $500 from Clopay or Overhead Door Company. I got it straight from the manufacturer. So think about wind ratings as well, because that's true for us when we think about hurricane force winds and all these other things that are non-fire rated. Once that garage door gets breached, the rest of the house can be a goner. So garage doors are a really big deal. And then fencing, we're pretty used to seeing metal fencing and other non-wood fencing, but that's also a really big deal. Okay, now let's talk about some new tech and some interesting stuff out there. There's a company in California that makes basically a house sprinkler system, which immediately makes me go, that's a really bad idea, because now we've got potential for leaks from your sprinkler system rather than just from God's rainstorm. But it actually does make sense, and I captured a couple videos. Let's see if we can get these to play here.
It's time to fire back. Introducing Frontline Wildfire Defense, a customized sprinkler system that saturates your house with water and firefighting foam so it's too wet to burn. Frontline's app alerts you when the fire is near and lets you remotely activate your system, even if you've evacuated. At Frontline, we're here to protect your family and home.
When I first saw that, I thought, I don't know about this. Would this really work? This seems kind of dumb. But when I was watching a bunch of the news reports from the Palisades, I came across this news report, and this was a pretty good sales pitch for this company, I gotta say.
Homes that somehow made it through the firestorm. Kelly Klein's house in Malibu wasn't one of them.
No firemen ever showed up at all. There's no firemen, there's no help. So these houses were just sacrificed.
But right next door, Klein's neighbor's home is still standing.
And we walked around it. I don't see any damage.
No, it's like a green oasis in the middle of a war zone.
Harry Statter founded Frontline Wildfire Defense System, one of a growing number of companies that will install a sophisticated sprinkler setup on your home. As we first reported back in 2023, Frontline created an app that can deploy the sprinklers and fire retardant even if you're not home.
If a customer enables that, then our software platform will detect fire relative to the location of your home. And it'll also detect wind gusts and fuel conditions. And it'll activate your system on your behalf. So when embers land on those materials, whether it be patio furniture, front door mats, adjacent plant fuels, they're in a condition that's too wet to burn.
Starting at about $500 a month, the system is far from cheap, but it has Kelly Klein's attention.
Very surprised that any house could make it through that.
Will you build differently?
I mean, I would put the frontline system clearly. I think absolutely have to build differently. I think mostly everybody who's gonna rebuild will build with fire safety in mind, definitely.
That was pretty cool. I suspect there's going to be a lot more of those in the future. And in fact, just last night, I didn't have a chance to add it in my slides, but I watched a wildland fighter that I watch occasionally in Oregon who was talking about like a do-it-yourself system. The website's called alpineskids.com, and it literally looks like some dude is building these in his back garage. But it's a rooftop sprinkler that you just place yourself on your roof ridge. It's kind of U-shaped, so it goes right in the ridge. And they make one that has a gutter hanger system as well. And this guy was protecting his Oregon build by getting him set up so that he could basically do this himself. And all it is just a brass sprinkler head with a nice, cool U-shaped thing that would either fit on a gutter or a bracket. So instead of spending however much that other one was, you could, in theory, set your homeowners up to do this yourselves or do this for your own house. That's pretty neat. Alpineskids.com is that website. But don't forget, if we've got an issue and power goes out, I don't know if this is much an issue for Austin, but it's absolutely an issue for California. There was no water and there was no power to those areas. And so if you had a sprinkler system, you had no water for it, and you had no power to, let's say, turn on your app that's going to turn it on. So the other thing we got to think about is, all right, how are we going to power this if we do have some type of backup system, and where's the water going to come from? More and more manufacturers seem to be addressing this. There's an interesting pool company that does precast pools. I think that's one of them in the bottom right there. I think that's one of them in the bottom right there. It's a company called Plungy. They're out of Australia where they have a lot of wildfires or brush fires in Australia. And they make a connection to their pools that's like the wildfire connection. So you or firefighters could basically just connect a hose right to the pool and use all 4,000 gallons of your pool. So there's a bunch of backup that needs to happen and needs to think about. That's pretty much it for me. Do we want to leave Q&A time for me now, or we'll do that later? That sounds good. I'm not going to be here, so answer those questions for them. I need to bounce after this. Can I take 5 minutes and answer questions real quick? I was trying to leave 5 at the end. Anybody have any questions for me? Yeah. I'll just repeat the question. What do I think about Shishugibon, which is the pre-charred wood siding? I think it looks great if you like that look. I'm not a fan personally of it. It ends up being a bit fragile the more heavy the char is. So for instance, I did it on a house that got hail damage and they wanted to replace all their siding because it didn't look the same. And I was like, well, it's supposed to not look perfect. That's the whole idea of it. So just make sure that your clients or you or whoever is going to use it expects the wabi-sabi of it doesn't look perfect. I don't believe that it actually is fire resistant. It doesn't meet any codes that I've seen. So I think the whole story of Japan pre-charred all their houses to do fire, I don't know if that's true or not, but I can tell you that they're not, the manufacturers that I've seen don't list them to be WUI compliant. Let's put it that way. I like that. Yes. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Peter's question was, or point was, hey, you should make sure that you design your systems to work with cisterns as well, or rainwater catchment. And I didn't say this, but I'm assuming that photo is a metal tank up against the house, not a plastic tank, right? Because if we had that 5-gallon rain barrel or 50-gallon rain barrel that we used to get from the green building program, that would be a source of ignition, which would ignite the house. So that should be far from the house. If it's going to be up against the house, it needs to be a metal rain barrel. Anybody else have any questions for me? Guys, I really appreciate your time. Thank you. And I'll be hanging out for a few minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. Please give him a round of applause.
Thank you so much.
Alrighty, thank you so much. Also, just to explain Wabi Sabi, it's a Eastern philosophical idea that you accept the imperfections as perfections in certain things. We're having a lot of Eastern philosophical talk today, which I find excellent. Our next speaker is Ain coming up. You're more than welcome to use a different microphone you'd like.
No, I'll use yours.
Okay. Not a problem. I'm just going to give you a little bit of your little bit background. They have AE did a wonderful job of these write-ups, so I think we'll definitely follow through. Yes, our next presenter, Ain Garrett Coleman, is the founding partner of the leading landscape architecture firm Coleman Associates in Austin, Texas, and has been working throughout the Central Texas region for over 40 years. Ain has built a firm that continues to thrive, improve, and produce award-winning designs that respond to the ever-changing demands of the industry and the environmental challenges of our time. As an industry leader, she has elevated the profession through continuous service to the surrounding community, mentorship of students and landscape architects early in their careers, and leadership in many professional organizations. Ain has been recognized for her accomplishments with the Gary S. Farmer Commendation of Excellence from the RCA, the Community Service Award from the Texas ASLA, very comprehensive, I'm telling you.
It's my whole presentation.
And the Distinguished Member Award from the Texas ASLA. She is a member of the Council of Fellows for ASLA, a Texas A&M University College of Architecture outstanding alumni, and was named one of the top women in commercial real estate by CREW Austin. Please welcome Ain Coleman.
Good afternoon. I arrived at noon today, so I heard that there were some great presentations earlier, and I think I'm going to overlap on a few of those. So bear with me, please, and please let me know if there's more I can add or that may be different than what you saw earlier. Okay, obviously. Okay, landscape design for wildfire defense. I've already said I've been in Austin for 44 years. We work on communities where fire prevention is a huge situation. We just dealt with Steiner Ranch and helped create a new access road for them. Because if y'all remember the fires that were in Steiner Ranch, because of the bottleneck that went in and exiting, they saw themselves that they had challenges they needed remedy. So we actually worked with them on a fire a pass-through road to get them out of there more effectively. Some of the notable projects we've done are the state capitol, and we actually worked on the project that we're in today for Austin-Energy, which is a great project. I brought a case study that hit home with me. I started looking at some other projects, but realized that the one I live on might be the best way for me to talk about fire defense, mainly because I haven't thought about it much. Oak Hill had a big fire. How many years ago? Maybe 10 years ago. We were at that time working on a green mobility challenge, which was a pro bono project, a competition to beautify and look at sustainable practices when designing the Highway 290 intersection there in Oak Hill. And that fire happened, and we happened to win that project, and they gave us a $10,000 reward, and we went out there to give it to the homeowners because of what they had just suffered. And that hit home big time because I could see that fire from where I live. And although it was at the ACC Austin Community College site, it looked like it was in my backyard. That's a phenomenon you never get used to, is seeing that and wondering how close is it to you. So where that blue line, I could plan north and see that fire, got me thinking about this place where I live, where my home and office is. So the blue line is Slaughter Creek, and the out green is the 15-acre area. Granada Hills is to the north of us, which are traditional single-family homes. We have a large lot subdivision to the left, which has very few homes on it, and a major gas line going through, which in my own community, there was a lot of discussion over the years about what happens if that gas line explodes. There was actually a petition not to touch it, even though the gas line wanted to come in and give us a brand new gas line for explosive purposes to make it more current in their technology, which had all kinds of sensors in it too. But it was really interesting to me that my neighbors protested this because we were more vulnerable before the gas line was replaced. So they actually did replace it, which we were very grateful for. But to be honest, I didn't think about gas lines going that close to my property. So my own case study again, this is zooming in on our area. The place to the right where you see the big red line going out is where I live, and to the left is where we office, and I'll show you some more images of that. So looking at irrigation as a defense to keep vegetation healthy, one of the big things we did, of course, for sustainable practices is we have a lot of drip on site and all native plantings, because we also have a deer problem, and a lot of the natives are resistant to deer. So there's motivation there, but also being a sustainable practice, as all of you are here in this room, we have all natives on site. I put on that outside edge impact heads on a separate valve. I use the term fire prevention. I know that that isn't exactly what it does, but it's on a separate valve, and we never run it unless it looks like the vegetation is completely charred. And so then we will irrigate it to keep it alive, and it's something more I want to talk about in a minute. We also have had about 3 or 4 versions of controllers since we've been out there for 25 years. And the one we have right now is a smart controller, similar to what the city of Austin requires, because I like to use our studio as a learning moment with our staff. Our youngest staff member always has to do property management, and that includes operating the irrigation controller. I know I have fellow landscape architects in the room. Y'all can raise your hands. And I think, how many people know how to operate an irrigation controller? Almost zero, right? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Okay, so some of the fire smart strategies that we use, and I want to, again, we'll get into the depth of this, is keeping vegetation healthy. Of course, starting with the right vegetation helps. We all want to use low water use plants and turf, and we want to prevent plant loss, because obviously a dead plant is going to be very susceptible to the fire issue. Number 2, keeping turf and native grass zones mowed, especially in the summer months, especially as the top part of the vegetation, even going into winter, starts to look pretty crispy, and keeping limbs away from structure at least 6 feet. And I have a couple of confessions here in a minute about I'm not doing a great job with that. So here are a few images of our studio is on the left-hand side. It's an all-metal building with an all-metal roof. I didn't think about it being a fire prevention asset at the time. I really did it for aesthetics, but I'm grateful that we did it. We do have a floating fire pit in our water feature where I have my koi pond. And again, we try to do our own sustainable practices. We have a garden that we get our young people to kind of plant plants in that little square garden and experiment with natives and some non-natives in that area, so that they're actually touching the landscape itself, again, the property management portion. And then a dry riverbed to manage water, and we have a rain garden on site. So again, some of these are in real life on this property. My house is on the right, which is nearby, and it also has a metal roof, but as you can see, it's covered in tree canopy. We nestled the house right in amongst the trees, because I didn't want to remove a single tree. But I have to confess, after the prior presentation, that I only get on that roof about twice a year to remove leaf litter. Although we have gutters, our roof is complex. Brian's been out there. And it's almost risking your life to get up there. And Brian's shaking his head. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. So if I had to do all over again, I would have a simpler roof line. So that is not a real bunny you see there in the background, but this is the back of our property, the back of where I live. We have a big Easter egg hunt out there every year, so that bunny stays year-round because people run around it as part of the games we play. But we have a combination of coastal Bermuda that was there before I bought the property, but we've tried to, over time, get it back to native grasses. The coastal Bermuda remains, but we do have a mixture of buffalo and springletop and a lot of other native grasses. So in that zone, in the back of the property, again, it's 15 acres. We rarely irrigate the area behind the house, and we never irrigate the area that's close to the creek. So it's in that rarely irrigated area we have a separate valve so we can run impact valves when we need to. So here's a close-up of the house. You can see the limbs hanging over my home, which I mentioned are dropping a lot of leaf litter, but we do try to keep them 6 feet away. We have lots of leaf litter in the gutters that accumulates and in that roof line area and the crickets of the roof line, and again, the native plants all the way around the house and studio. The studio, I don't think I have a graphic of it, but we do have a gravel band all the way around the studio itself. On the right is the large fire pit that we have on our property because we do have regular limb droppings on 15 acres. Pecans, I call it self-prune. They can look perfectly healthy and then drop a major limb right before your very eyes that sometimes is fully vegetated and you wonder why. But we do try to manage our limb removal, and we do burn on site when we can, of course. But what I did is I put a hose valve box in there so that we can watch that. We never do it too large, but I wanted to have at every place where we have fire burning, we have two, one at the studio and one here, that we have a hose bib very close by. So things I need to remedy. When Winter Storm Uri happened on our acreage, we lost a lot of trees, as I'm sure many of you in this room did. And it has taken us since that time burning bit by bit and chipping bit by bit to get rid of it, and we still haven't. So this is one thing that as a result of this, that we're definitely going to prioritize because I see it with my friends and neighbors stockpiling wood on a regular basis next to their home or on their land. Another thing that actually jumps into commercial use is shredded mulch from down limbs and trees. When chipping occurs, even on large projects and it's stockpiled, I worked on Avery Ranch several years ago. We had several stockpiles of mulch, and one of them ignited and caught fire. And it did travel, but I was surprised that just the decomposing nature of itself combined with the heat, I got a phone call, went out there and had to see it for myself. So again, this is one of the things that I want to do is finish the work being done because I had no idea. I heard that the Dillo Dirt operation has also experienced that. Maybe some of y'all know about that, but I was comforted and surprised to hear that they deal with the same kind of thing. So mulch piles can ignite. I want to talk a little bit about a different way of looking at irrigation. So something that I say on a regular basis, again, I go back to the issue that most people really don't know how irrigation systems work, and they don't know how they operate, and they don't know too much about the technology and the design of irrigation systems, even at the manufacturer component level. So one thing I like to say over and over again is irrigation does not use water, people do. You have to turn it on. I know we all know that, but that image in the background of the spray heads up in the air, watering nothing but turf and pavement, has gotten a bad rap in our industry because it's often misused. Irrigation and hose watering are often wrongly vilified, and I don't like the negativity of it because it's a huge tool for us in fire prevention by keeping our vegetation healthy. Water conservation, the water crisis that we're in, and the regulations we have in place are absolutely necessary for water conservation, but I do feel like we may need to go the next step and coexist better with the ever-evolving irrigation technology. I think as landscape architects dealing with commercial landscapes, we need to educate ourselves more on irrigation and develop better relationships between irrigation suppliers, designers, and installers to educate all of us in the room about how we can better use our precious water source. So the purpose of irrigation is, and I know all of you know this, but I think it's a good reminder sometimes, stressed plants require more water to recover. So what we do it by regulation, by saying we can water once a week, is it's necessary and tempting and being done as we speak that we overwater. Because we know in 110-degree temperature that we're not going to be able to water again. So what happens, especially in a new landscape installation, the plants have been grown in a very controlled environment. Moist soils, sometimes shade cloths, fertilized, pruned, loved on. Then they get put in a truck and then they deliver to the nursery where if they're being held for a while, they are watered and taken care of again. And then they go on site, they go into the ground, we do some initial watering, and then we put them on a 1 day per week. So they experience what we laugh about in the office. We say, these plants were raised on crack, and now we're putting them cold turkey. They've gone from kid gloves and being nurtured to now watering once per week. So that's why we hear from our industry friends that are installing landscapes and maintaining landscapes that we need to do a couple of things. We need to better manage our grow-in period of time so that we can actually get them off the water dependency and transition them to a once per week and not the cold turkey that we're doing. I don't know if you've noticed, I know that there are many of this room that watch this closely, the beautiful installations that are going on our highways. MOPAC, I-35, I worked on SH-130, and the landscapes were beautiful. And some of them, we had a 90-day grow-in period, some we had 1 year. The ones that are closest to where I live on South MOPAC, the installation is beautiful. They've cut the water off after, it might be 2 years. I know it's been at least 1. And the plants are dying. I mean, they are just cratering, especially some of the trees, because trees do take more than 1 year to establish, especially in the very non-native environments we're putting them in. That's another thing about native plants. Native plants are really meant to grow out in a native condition, but we put them in heat island situations or reflective heat situations next to architecture and buildings or next to concrete, and they are not growing in the environment they're most accustomed to. Another thing that native plants do is they go into dormancy themselves when they don't receive water in the native environment. So they'll actually crisp up, and then when water hits, they'll green up again or go through their normal seasonal change. But we don't allow them to do that in a commercial environment. Even here, as we're looking out on one of the projects that we've worked on, is the public is not used to going up to a plant in July, especially a native plant, and letting it go into dormancy. They want it to stay alive. So we're going to have to start looking at different ways to make sure that we keep our plant material healthy. The other question I ask myself, and I'm not popular for this, and I'll go ahead and admit it. Every month at my studio, I get a repair bill for drip irrigation. And when I say every month, I mean every single month. There's one on my desk the day before coming here for $354 because the squirrels, the mice, the replanting of plant material, like replacing, or what I like to do is just try plants. So I'll find a new plant, put it in the garden, and my intern who's responsible for doing the planting comes in and says, I just broke a complete drip line trying to plant that plant you told me to plant. I was at recently the Texas ASLA convention and went to the botanical garden there in Houston, and I saw a beautiful new installation going in of a seasonal planting because they're in the business of showing off plant material. And right next to it was the gentleman talking, and I said, what do y'all do? Were you there, Margaret? I don't know if you were there. I said, what do you do when you replant? How do you manage your drip irrigation? He said, oh, we take it out, and then we put new in every time we replant a mass planting like that. So is that sustainable? Another thing I hear a lot is you can't see drip when it's leaking water. It takes a while to see it. I'm not saying eliminate drip. I'm just saying I think sometimes we use it in places we shouldn't be using it. because of things like that. You don't see it. It'll be under the mulch for a long time, and I lost my train of thought on that. I hope it comes back to you in a minute. But do we really want to do drip always? We're going to talk a little bit about these slides are important. So the purpose of irrigation, the technology available is there are ways through soil moisture and through climatic changes. So the irrigation system, smart controllers can monitor the evapotranspiration going on in the landscape, and it can speak to the controller to put back the exact amount of water needed to keep that plant alive. So my theory behind this is if the city needs to, and they do, all municipalities do, all of Texas needs to regulate water consumption. But let's say Margaret's project gets X amount of water because she's got so many zones running so many minutes a day, so much of a volume, so her consumption is 500,000 gallons per day. So do you need to put that 500,000 gallons per day on, one single event, or can she take the technology and do it 2 days or 3 days using the same amount of water and manage your own consumption so that your plant materials stay alive and healthy going into the next seasonal cycle? The other thing is water, and I underlined this, water efficiency sprinkle nozzles have gone through many, many, many modifications. I had the opportunity to go to a Rainbird manufacturer, and what they do and continue to do is not only work on their controllers, but they are designing nozzles that put out bigger droplets, because the number one reason for using drip is evaporation. Isn't that the number one? So their thoughts are if you can really minimize evaporation, then you may actually have more use. You've seen the little stream rotors that put out the spaghetti of water rather than the spray. Those are incredibly efficient, and we use those a lot in turf areas. The other thing is the convenience. Now you can monitor water loss, broken lines, all kinds of things on your cell phone or at your desktop. So you can actually manage drip as well in this technology. So the convenience of it is also completely different than it was 20 years ago, but we're still operating our irrigation policies as we were 20 years ago. So maybe we need to reconsider some of this. I heard earlier that gravel was talked about, because when we're talking about fire in the landscape, one of the real obvious issues, you saw my mulch pile, is mulch in the landscape, especially because we put 3 inches down, which is a lot of mulch. Sometimes I wonder about that too, because I know where that originated, because I had discussions with the city of Austin. They actually said, and I get it, we specify 3 inches so we get 2. But what happens when you plant a small plant? A 1-gallon plant in a bucket is about 8 inches deep. So when you put that 1 gallon, if I'm wrong, let me know, Margaret. So when you put that in the ground and you put 3 inches, that plant's sitting in 5 inches of soil. And guess what happens? It dries out. So I'm wondering about that. Okay, gravel is showing up everywhere. The code is very ambiguous, and I think that was talked about more, but I'm going to get into a little bit more of the specifics, because I mentioned this to the city. Knowing I was coming to speak to y'all, I actually called the city again and said, help me check my sanity here. Is it as ambiguous as I think it is? And guess what the answer is? Yes. Not only is it ambiguous, it's also different for the different departments in the city. So environmental sees it different than the landscape regulation, which sees it different than Austin Water. So many plants do suffer, and I heard earlier that there was discussions about it depends on the color of the gravel, it depends on the openness of the gravel. It's still going to change the temperature of a plant no matter what color you do. So some of them thrive in that. I've practiced in Arizona and I've practiced in New Mexico where we don't use wooden mulch at all. We use 100% gravel, but the plant material species are specific for gravel use. Here, our code, I'm going to go back to the code does not talk about the type of plants you have to use in gravel. In fact, mostly we do it with just trees and parking islands is where you see it the most. I worked, in fact, we're right here, in Miller. I got a phone call from the developer here working on this project, and he had not forgotten. They were selling the project, and they had a letter of credit still posted for their landscape at the city they wanted back. So I was not involved at this part of the transaction. So the city came out to look at the shopping center where a lot of the gravel was in the parking islands, and I would say it was probably 50%, maybe more, of gravel. And so the city said, no, gravel is not allowed, and we will not give you your money back until you take all that gravel out and put down mulch. And that's what they had to do. They removed 100% of the gravel where the Home Depot is. That's what I'm talking about. And they put bark mulch in to get their letter of credit released. Filter fabric. Filter fabric, I hate it. I worked on a project that was a rooftop garden, very large one at 360 and BK Road. It was the largest one at the time. It was over an acre. And I was the second landscape architect on it because the first landscape architect made a mistake I would have made. So I inherited the project, and I saw what the landscape architect did, and I said I would have done it exactly the same way. So at the exit roof drains, on this roof drain, they had the big old beehives, and they covered it in gravel. They covered the French drain pipes in gravel, and then they wrapped it all in filter fabric. Well, they got a freaky 8-inch rain in a couple hours there, and the whole roof structure cratered. It looked like something I'd never seen before. Heaved sidewalks everywhere, heaved stone and patios. It was a disaster. So filter fabric can actually prevent water from getting to your plant materials. And clients often have a very low tolerance to weeds, because what do they do with weeds? Weeds and hand pulling in a commercial environment along a large project. Landscape contractors can't afford to hand weed. They just can't. So what do they use? Chemicals. So filter fabric, I actually think, puts up a layer of silt, and that's where the seed germinates through the gravel, and that's where but so in other words, if you're not seeing a lot of weeds and gravel on your commercial projects, it's very likely they're using herbicides. Okay, gravel can be used as a weapon. I did a bioswale at an elementary school. AISD wanted it, everybody wanted it. This is an ongoing concern. Guess what the students are doing with the rocks? They're throwing it at the teachers. And in the domain, we did a rock skate patio, and we lost a huge window with somebody throwing it through a window. And at the state capitol, we did some gravel, and we've got issues there too. So we're actually getting our clients to sign off on the use of gravel. We don't know what else to do because they can be used as weapons. I saw a piece of bull rock, a big white piece in Dallas, thrown through a car window. When I went to get in my car, I was like, at least it wasn't me. They shouldn't have driven a Tesla. No, I didn't say that. Okay, so here's the code. The first word in the first line is the one you need to focus on. The Land Development Code allows a required area to include organic. Okay, so the fixation should be here. If there's anybody with the city, correct me, because I just got a clarification again from the city. So required landscape area, for those of y'all that deal with this. Street yard, 20% of the area in front of your building and next to your street, for simplistic purpose, 20% of that area is required landscape area. Well, we had this other code that came into play about 15 years ago or so called Subchapter E, where the desire was to put a lot of these buildings like the one we're in closer to the public realm and right-of-way to make a more walkable city, which has been very successful. But what it did is this building is not set back from the street, so the amount of street yard required is a much smaller number than it used to be. So let's say I've got an acre. So if I've got an acre of landscape area, only 20% of that can be in gravel. And parking islands are required. So if I have parking islands and I have 100 parking islands, then 20 of those 100 can be gravel. But what's happening is maintenance companies are getting a lot of pressure for the cost of water, the challenges they're having with keeping their plant materials alive with the water restrictions. And so they're wanting to put gravel in after they've received building permits, like I mentioned with the Home Depot over here. So how many of you are seeing parking lots in shopping centers with 100% or 85% gravel. It's not allowed by code. Funny story, when our mayor was running for election, I was at a fundraiser and he said, hey, my wife, we put some zoysia out in our yard and it all died. I'm thinking about putting gravel down. And I said, well, Mayor, you can't. He said, well, I see it. My neighbors are doing it. It's all over the place. How come I can't put it down? I said, because your code does not allow it. That's why I put residential there at the bottom. So everything I just described, this is the commercial landscape code. The residential code, as far as I know, doesn't allow gravel at all. So I had a client, we were doing a townhome project for him. He put gravel between the sidewalk and the back of curb. I didn't know about it because we did a simple code compliant plan. Went out there and that had to be removed because environmental does not consider gravel revegetation. It's not a vegetative element. So if you're trying to get revegetation for erosion control, then you cannot have gravel as a substitution. Why did I choose plant material selections last to talk about? Because that's probably what popped into your mind. It sure did mine when I thought about fire prevention in the landscape. Why wouldn't you talk about plant materials? Well, the real issue, I think, is the more I thought about it, is healthy plants are going to be less vulnerable to fire, but they're not going to prevent fire. But they're not going to be fuel for you if they're not crispy. But when doing a little bit of research, yuccas, agaves, succulents, and other fleshy plants that hold water are most fire resistant. It comes with a warning. When SoCo first caught on as a destination, I don't know if many of you remember this, there's still remnants of it. I thought everything out there was going to be planted in agaves. Landscape architecture, like a lot of things, including architecture, go through trends, right? So agaves were the big trend until people figured out that they can kill you, harm you, maim you. So again, I used my studio as my laboratory. I planted some agaves next to my walkway to the front entry, and a vendor friend of mine came to drop off some samples and had her kid with her, and he fell down and hit a very small agave, one of the dwarf ones, a Victoria agave. Very small spike. And I said, oh, Kim, he'll be fine. Just come on in. His hand swole up. And because there's a little bit of poison in the tip of those. But the poison is the least the concern. I have an agave at the entry of my driveway. Big old agave I put Christmas bulbs on every year. Right, Brian? And I was putting a Christmas bulb on because I take the hook off and I put the open hole over the spike. It holds it perfectly. And I bent down to put it on, and the leaf next to it went right here. So this swole up, but of course, my eye. I mean, whoa. So my respect for agaves, yuccas don't have so much of this problem, but beware of agaves and where you put them. Plants to use less. This is interesting too. I Googled, somebody on the website said that cedars were actually fire resistant, and then somebody else said cedars are bad. But the one plant, there's another landscape architect that we're teamed with on a project here that is known for her native plantings, which a lot of us are, but she's been doing it for as long as I have, and Margaret has. And she said, I'm using grasses less. And not for the fire reason, but because they require a lot of maintenance. You see them balled up and cut back. Well, Mother Nature used to take care of regenerating grasses through fire. These grasses, these bunch grasses, these native grasses used to be burned down. They would come back from the earth. But now we have to cut them. When they cut them, they gather all of the old material. They put it in big black bags, and it goes to our landfill. Now, I love native grasses. Absolutely love them. But there's just something to think about, because when they are dormant, they are more susceptible to be inflammable when you've got that much dead vegetation on them. The lower right-hand corner, this is at a project here in town. This is what they have to do to take away old dormant grass growth, is they cut it all down. So everything you see in that lower right-hand corner that was tall is now in a bag in a landfill. So I love native grasses. I haven't stopped using them, but it's in the back of my mind to maybe use them a little less. And I'll use this opportunity to say something else about the nursery industry. The plant material growing industry, they're very aware that water being the resource it is, that they have to evolve themselves. So there are plants being propagated that are not native, that do coexist with native plantings pretty well. I have them on the same zone. I experiment with these kind of things. And you've got examples of it out here in the landscape. Microclimate matters a lot. Most natives love full sun. There's very few part shade or partial that are evergreen or semi-evergreen. So there are plant materials being propagated and experimented with it and evolving that we can coexist with our landscape. You know, for example, purple lantana is not necessarily, it's not a native. It's a lantana that's been propagated to have the characteristics of a native, and it's got the native botanical name, but the cultivar itself is not native. I only preach this because I think we need, if water consumption and fire prevention is our number one goal, we may have to open our minds to plants that perform as well, but maybe don't have the dormancy as some of our grasses. I'll take this as another little moment to talk about trees. I'm speculating something I haven't speculated in a long time. I think we're going to have a tree availability bubble, and since I've got an audience, I'll talk about it. There's a very large grower that just has gone through some financial times. They went in and bought a lot of nurseries, so you may know them by different names, but it's one big holding company. And they are reorganizing, but they weren't able to plant a lot while they've been financially reorganizing. So because they bought up a lot, like for example, these trees came from one of those vendors. And the Uri and the droughts that we've had, we don't have as much small material coming up as we are consuming. COVID played into that. All these factors are finally kind of colliding, probably a year or two later than I would have expected it to. But I just got warned about this recently. And the reason I'm mentioning is, one, we want to take care of them when they get here, but we may have to soften our expectations on size for containers. Again, this has nothing to do with the subject matter at hand. But because trees are such an important element in our landscape, I think it's worth mentioning that we're going to have some, prices are definitely going up. That was the reason I got this information. And availability looks like it's going to suffer for a little while. That kind of concludes everything. Again, I've used this on more than one occasion. There is no easy solution. It's not arriving at my door either when it comes to landscape prevention, because I know nothing about it at all. But I hope I've given some things to share. I am a rule follower. I do believe in code. I participate in code. But I think we may need to evolve a little bit in how we look at water consumption in the landscape. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ain. We appreciate that. So we actually were going to leave questions for the end. We just took questions for Mac just because he had to leave right away. But yes, again, so we are down to our last speaker. Thank you all for being here. Again, thank you all for being very attentive and keeping all your questions, holding it as long as you can just for the end. But yeah, our last speaker is Robert, and he's a conservation program coordinator for the Austin Energy Green Building Program. With almost 20 years in the environmental and sustainability industry, Robert is now a building science nerd, as he's proudly proclaimed himself. And he's promoting better buildings through the Green Building Rating Program. And I'd please welcome Robert Eby.
Thanks so much for having me here. Yes, I'm Robert. I'm one of the Green Building raters with Austin Energy Green Building. The Austin Energy Green Building Program provides design tools and rates the sustainability of new and remodeled buildings for single-family, multifamily, and commercial projects. Our ratings promote many of the principles that you've learned about today. Now we'll take a look at a few of the measures that are most directly related to wildfire defense. And first, we're going to talk about the commercial rating measures. The Landscapes for Resilience measure promotes design for wildfire efficiency. Projects plan, design, install, and maintain landscaping and associated structures and hardscapes according to the National Fire Protection Association's home ignition zones. Additionally, projects should select plants in accordance with the FireWise according to their fire resistance and growth characteristics. And finally, they need to evaluate the site proximity to the urban wildland interface and the ember zone and design landscaping to mitigate the risk of wildfire on site. Examining a project's vulnerability to wildfire is part of the Vulnerability Preparedness Assessment. Project teams review the City of Austin Hazard Mitigation Plan to identify hazards such as floods, wildfire, and chronic stressors like heat waves, poor air quality, and drought affecting the project site and building function. They should assess vulnerabilities of the site and the building, and also incorporate findings into the project's programming, planning, and design to reduce vulnerabilities and increase resilience. Further details about these measures and all the other measures of the commercial rating are available online in the Commercial Rating 2022 Guidebook. The current 2023 multifamily rating does not contain wildfire defense measures per se, but we will work with the Austin Fire Department to draft measures for the upcoming 2026 rating. But please note that the multifamily project teams can submit innovation measures that achieve these goals and earn points as well. And I would just like to say, as a multifamily rater myself, I've been looking for well-designed multifamily properties that are incorporating wildfire principles. And if you are a multifamily developer, please talk to me. I'd love to talk to you more about specifically what you're incorporating to prevent wildfires in your multifamily properties. It's something we want to encourage more of, and I haven't seen very much of to date. We'd love to promote that further on our multifamily properties. The commercial, multifamily, and single-family ratings promote resilience by encouraging they all promote resilience by encouraging the installation of low-water native and adapted plants, reducing outdoor air infiltration, reducing the use of vinyl and plastic products, and constructing or planning for combustion appliance-free buildings. Beginning with the 2020 rating, the single-family team has worked with the Austin Fire Department to promote designing Austin homes for resilience. Achieving at least one wildfire resilience measure is required for ratings at the 2-star level and above. The first measure requires either an unvented attic assembly or attic vents with non-combustible screening with 1/8 inch or smaller openings. The second measure requires selecting at least 3 measures from among 8 different options. All the options are recommended to increase resilience. The first 5 of these include wood fencing that's located at least 10 feet from the structures. Any attached wood decking, railing, and pergola materials are ignition-resistant or non-combustible material and or use metal angle flashing at the intersections. All glazed windows and doors adjacent to exterior decks or other outdoor combustible structures are tempered dual-pane glass or glass block. Exterior siding and skirting is non-combustible, which is one of the most common measures we've seen in Austin. And roof gutters have a fine mesh screen guards or other methods that prevent the accumulation of flammable debris. The last 3 options include roofing that is Class A fire rated and all roof intersections have metal flashings. No planting beds are within 5 feet of the home's foundation unless adjacent to non-combustible material, such as masonry, cement, or stucco. And all landscape plants are drought-tolerant species or landscape is irrigated. And finally, the most commonly implemented strategy for single-family is to create a defensible space zone around the perimeter of all structures, cleared of underbrush and deadwood 6 to 10 feet above the ground. The perimeter must be a minimum of 30 feet or to the lot line. Even though only projects attempting to build to the 2 to 5 star level are required to achieve these measures, almost all rated homes do achieve them, proving that it is not difficult to build a more resilient home. In fact, any green building is likely to be more durable and resilient. I like to define green building as any building that is built above code. There's many different definitions, but I think that's the simplest way to define a green building. When you use durable materials that are well installed with an eye to prevent water and air intrusion into the building, you're also designing a building that will prevent wildfire intrusion. The reason you've seen so many pictures of passive houses in California is not because passive house is inherently a fireproofing measure, but it's because they're designing buildings that are airtight, that have ventless attics, and they're just inherently built with a higher quality of standard, of better materials, better workmanship. So these images you've seen in California, the passive houses being surrounded by burnt debris, again, it's not that passive house is a fire standard, it's just the houses were built in a way that prevents fire. Austin Energy Green Building will continue collaborating with the Austin Fire Department, other city departments, and the Austin-Travis County Wildfire Coalition to promote wildfire safety and resilience in Texas. Stay tuned for our 2026 rating updates coming out later next year. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Robert. And then also, if we could get Ain and yourself just up front so some folks can take some questions from y'all. All right. And then did we have any questions from the group?
Rob, I've seen it mentioned a few times. What is the fire resistive aspects of tempering the glass?
So tempered glass is, I believe it's fired at a higher temperature. And so what happens with tempered glass is that when it gets hot, it will shatter, it will break, but it shatters with a webbing. It will not break and fall out. It will just shatter the web, like if you get a rock on your car window, instead of that glass breaking and rocks hitting your face, it just webs and sticks together. And that layer protects on a dual pane window, that first layer that is tempered. When that shatters, the back layer of glass is still intact. So the front layer is protecting the back layer, and that back layer is really what's protecting your home from intrusion of smoke and other toxic products. But the tempered is what keeps it from shattering.
I think you just described laminated glass. I see, that's my question. I can understand that it was laminated glass, but I don't see, tempered glass is what falls apart in those little 1/4-inch type pieces on the ground, so you don't have those large pieces to cut your arm off. Mm-hmm. But you just described laminated glass, and that's why I'm confused about this.
Okay.
So this is for my 6 months working in a glass shop. Yeah, so similar laminated glass, you have a coating, right, of plastic or something on either side of that, and then when it shatters, it's trapped in there. Tempered glass is impact resistant, right? You see the news footage of people throwing chairs at the window at the store and it won't break. The secret is if you tap it on the corner with a key, it'll just shatter into all those squares. And so it is a glass is thought of to be a very slow fluid. That's why you get those wavy windows in old homes and things. And so the tempered glass it can be different thicknesses, just like other glass, but it is fired hotter, longer. It's impact resistant and higher heat tolerance. And I do have a call in to some glass experts to see what the highest fire rating commercially or privately available is. I'll let you know if I find that out.
I mean, I'm not trying to be nervous.
No, go for it.
This is residential construction we're talking about. And when you talk about all these qualities, are you talking about the tempered glass that is typically put in residential doors and stuff? Because what he described makes sense, but that's not tempered glass. What you described maybe makes sense, but I don't see how that keeps fire at bay.
So it's like, yeah. Okay, there you go. Yeah. It's, yeah.
So one of my colleagues just mentioned that tempered glass is 5 times stronger and more heat resistant as well.
And just as my experience working with trees, a very healthy tree can be made available over time. But nevertheless, in the same sense, glass will break over time with enough intensity, enough heat. Well, and we have one more person.
Oh, let's just pile it on with the windows. I just like maybe something that kind of got skipped over in all of this. The whole, I just want to point out the aspect of why when the glass breaks, we're worried about that. And so that's like the ember intrusion. Now you've got curtains that are just going to ignite up from the ember intrusion. So that double pane, we generally expect, whether it's tempered or not, we expect that first pane to crack. And that typically, you know, you heard us talking about how fast fire passes through. Like if you've got a bush or something that's burning right in front of that window, by the time that bush is no longer burning, typically that second pane doesn't break. So the amount of time exposure, so you get that first pane that breaks, second pane usually makes it through that burn time of whatever vegetation is directly in front of that window. So that's the point I wanted to maybe add that hadn't been addressed so far.
Another question over here.
Since we're on windows and glass, how come Matt made a good point about the vinyl windows? How come WUI doesn't answer any of those questions with the glass falling out if it's vinyl? And is a composite window like an Anderson 100 or a Marvin Essentials, is that going to behave like vinyl or not?
So yeah, the vinyl will not last as long. And similar to what David was just saying, there is an expectation if it deforms, that first pane of glass could fall out, or if it breaks first, but then you still have the second pane, which I think through IBHS testing or some other testing agency, they've shown like that inside pane stays even when that frame is deformed. But again, minimum code, so you can always do a better product than what the minimum code allows. But it's, you know, it's set so that people can have a chance of affording to be able to comply with the code. But if you are going to, you know, if you have the means to do so, put in something non-combustible that's not going to deform. And then the glass still might break on that outer pane, but less of a chance of it falling out and instead breaking first.
Yeah, my question was regarding WUI requirements for windows. Same thing we're discussing in different zones. Like, I don't know if like zone A requires aluminum window and zone C is just fine with tempered and vinyl window. Like, I tried to look online, but it didn't give me a definite answer.
Yeah, there's a guide right now on the Wildland-Urban Interface Code for City of Austin. It's a guide to proximity classes. It'll be updated to be guide to proximity zones. But it's only required to have your glass be compliant in Zone A. Zone B and C, it doesn't need to be, unless you have a skylight. And then actually with your skylight, the glass needs to comply, and then also your frame needs to be non-combustible. So in that case, it can't be vinyl or any kind of like plastic polycarbonate.
This is a question not about windows, and it's more for Ann. I'm wondering, Ann, if in your experience there's any role for goats in managing fuel in understory and the like. Just can you comment on that, please?
Is this a trick question? Did you say goats? My only experience with goats was at the Umlauf Sculpture Garden, where they were brought in to eat the poison ivy, and they did a great job. I have seen goats completely eat everything, including asphalt shingles. So, so I don't know that I know. I mean, does anybody else know?
Yeah, actually, just to jump in, so with the wildfire division, specifically our fire resilient landscapes, a big thing that we push for folks with 10 acres or more or significant land that doesn't have the ability to get some kind of mechanical use in there, goats do a great job of cleaning out the understory. They have very tough teeth. They can handle Himalayan blackberry. They can handle poison ivy, poison oak if you're out west. They do a great job of getting their little hooves as high up as they can and pulling all the green, what we call ladder fuel, away as possible. They don't do so well with bamboo, but you know, bamboo is its own kind of enigma in that way. But I think you had a question, sir?
Well, I understand that our climate is changing and that in not very long time we will have the climate of of West Texas with the rainfall that they have in Marfa now. And the question for the landscape architect is how do you have you considered how we should address this change?
What we see in Arizona and New Mexico and other places, those are my personal experiences, is a lot more gravel use, a smaller variety of plant materials, and especially in commercial applications, and fewer plantings. We tend to mass plant to plant, turf to turf. And they use turf as a ground cover, not as a massing. So they use small areas of turf, usually for recreation or a small piece that's regulated. They also have been using for years artificial turf, which I'm grateful we didn't venture into that because it's a little bit of a trend too, but it actually is 20 degrees minimum warmer than regular turf. But they do use it to get the experience of turf, the aesthetic of turf, without the water consumption. But I do think our code needs to be amended for more gravel when using the right plant materials. I probably muddied up a little bit of what I was saying before. I do like gravel, and I think it has a big role in this evolution of climate change we're experiencing. But the code does not say use this genre, this type of species of plant material, and use fewer of them. My own staff is having a very difficult time converting because they're used to 3 feet on center covering the entire area. And so getting them to do random plantings is like mind-blowing because they're used to saying 100 square feet, I need 10 plant materials on 3-foot centers. It looks like a grid. And we're having to get away from that. So I think different mulches, different quantity, and different species. One of the things, though, that's frustrating about this trend is it bites us in the butt every now and then. So a good example of that is Palo Verde. Everybody loves Palo Verde, including me, which is very much used in Arizona, Vegas, everywhere else. But here at the domain area, we planted several of them, and they completely just defoliated, scratched them. They were dead. The weird thing is, they came back. It was shocking to me. I don't know why. Several of them did not, but in that case, they did. We installed the state capitol primarily with natives during the snowstorm and coming off of a drought and coming during COVID. I think there was every obstacle with that. And then we lost a lot of plant materials due to the Uri. And so I went and walked it in March, April, and I'm like, okay, we've lost at least a third of our natives because the timing of planting was a brand new installation. So the state said, well, we're not paying for it. And I said, it's act of God. It's act of Mother Nature. The landscape contractor can't be held responsible for it. Well, then it's your fault. You specified these darn things. And I'm like, they're literally native. I can see one from my house. They're native occurring. I'm not paying for it either. Plus, I don't have the money. Can't do it. But what happened was they procrastinated on making a decision on this. We walked the project in May, late May. A lot of those natives came back much, much later. And I think that's a climate anomaly too, to not only have the drought conditions, but to have that weird random incident of cold and moisture that looked like it was going to have a big impact. So that's another story. So that in microclimates, the more urban we become, the more microclimate we have. And I think an awareness of that, it's very difficult for landscape architects to wrap their heads around it because I can't believe I'm going to say this, I shouldn't go here, but our education system does not focus on plant material design so much. They teach identification and the theory, and so it's incumbent upon us professionals to teach planting design. Margaret, I know, Anna, there's other landscape architects. Please disagree with me on this, but they don't have the experience, especially when it comes to innuendo and looking at right plant, right place. I don't give a care where you came from. That's where we need to start from. What will live in that microclimate? And of course, we don't want to do invasive or anything like that, but I think getting to that level of education is a void, quite frankly, that we have right now. Now, Google, and that makes you crazy too, because homeowners now, it's kind of as an employer, it's difficult because I have homeowners that are better educated than my staff sometimes because they do the research. Like I said, I'm truly in the weeds, but educating and modifying our traditional practice is a challenge.
And I'll add one more note about trees, because trees are so much longer lived in a landscape than just a plant material. And I have a forestry background. The arborist industry is looking at trees, understanding that climate change is coming, that we're hotter and drier now than we were 100 years ago, and trees live for over 100 years. Adapting tree species that may not be native, but are adapted. So a lot more species from the west, Arizona cypress, a lot more species from Mexico, Mexican white oak. Stop planting Shumard oaks and start planting Mexican white oaks. Not only are red oaks also maybe not as well climate adapted, but there's also the oak wilt, which affects red oaks more. White oaks are not as susceptible to oak wilt. Emerald ash borer is migrating here, so ashes aren't desirable. But there are species that are more adapted to warmer climates, even in West Texas and Mexico, that might be more appropriate to start thinking about planting for your long-lived trees that aren't just going to be seasonal, but are going to be 100 years. So think about also in your landscapes, be intentional about the tree you plant, because that tree can sometimes outlast the building that's planted next to.
Question about the landscape. Not the landscape, irrigation. It seems like you were trying to talk about a lot of different things in that. If you are watering 1 day a week, what do you recommend? And then what was your solution for not watering 1 day a week? Some sort of volume usage, like the city controls the irrigation controller? What was your intent there?
I know I was all over the place with that. What I was trying to articulate is it is easy to calculate volume. That's where rainwater collection comes into play, and Austin Green building requirements and LEED requirements. So we're very accustomed to calculating our water consumption needs, what we need and what sources we have to make up for it, whether it's collection or something else. So what I'm saying is the way regulations are today in our city, and they're good regulations, we all know why. I'm not questioning the why. But we have X amount of volume that we need to maintain a healthy landscape. But in order to do that, we're gifted 1 day per week. So let's say it's Monday, and we get a ½ inch of rain on Sunday, yesterday when it was 100 degrees. The landscape contractor has to water on Monday because they don't have to. They can remotely turn it off. But they're going to use what they're allowed to do on that day so they can make it the other 6 days before they get to water again on Monday. So technology will take the amount that's needed, take into consideration that ½ inch, and then you may water that next Friday or Saturday. with the amount that's needed to meet the requirements of the water calculation. So that's what I'm trying to say, is I'm not advocating at all for additional water consumption, just the way we distribute it to keep our plant materials healthy. I hope that helped. Well, by using the smart controllers, the time and advocacy, which is why I'm bringing it up. It's not popular to say you like hard pipe irrigation because, oh, Ann hates drip. I just hate paying for it. I want it to work. I want these things to work. But I think we do need to sit down. It's difficult. Those of you that work in large government agencies, it is difficult to move quickly. And it's difficult to get everybody on board because of lack of information or old ways of looking at things, right? So the fewer people you have in the room, it doesn't have to be me or Anna or Margaret or anybody else or Peter, anybody, but it needs to be 5 or 6 people that have practiced long enough to know. Bring in the irrigation technology people. I meet with the city, I meet with campuses, I meet with so many people. I've never had an irrigation specialist in that meeting looking at regulation. Now, maybe others have, but I think it's time to bring our brothers and sisters of the irrigation technology into the fold of water regulation so they can educate us. We may go back to where we were, but I don't think we are. I've personally been shocked with the fact that I can now look on my phone because I said, I haven't seen my system work in a while. Things are looking pretty dry. It's 100 degrees. And my intern showed it to me because they're better at technology than I am and said, this is how much we used. Do you want to change it? And I'm like, you showed me. I mean, it does work. I mean, the technology we have available, we're just not using it. Again, I'll restate it. The city of Austin requires a smart controller on every project, but you can't use it, and we don't use it. Let's start there.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Again, a special thank you to our speakers and the fantastic presentations for them today.